like even Google, if you destroy everything today and you tell them let's build this again, I don't think they will be able to
It'd be
do
different.
it. You know?
It'd be different.
It's gonna be different.
On SEO Unveiled today, we've got Ali Syed, and he's a senior SEO analyst at Quest Software and the founder of Aleph Website, small marketing agency in New York. He's got experience working as a freelance consultant, but also has worked for startups and corporations doing SEO on multiple levels. I'm really excited to have Ali here today, and just wanted to introduce him to everybody. Hi, Ali.
Hi, Clay. Glad to be here.
Good. So, the first thing that we always like to get into is why did you get into SEO in the first place? It's always an interesting career choice, and it's always great to understand a little bit about how people got into this thing.
Yeah. So as many people did, we didn't know instantly that SEO was our call, and so was my case. I started out by studying business and management, and then I got more specific with marketing, and then I did this interesting master's thesis about consumer behavior, and that really got me going because I realized that search engines contain so much information that by observing how people search for information we can learn a lot, and by seeing how they behave on certain pages we can understand key patterns and maybe even map out, like perceptual maps, how they approach content, how they consume content. And, like I always like saying, if it's bookmarked, your SEO job is done, like,
yes.
So that's something that got me going. And, ever since I was very interested in how search engines work. And naturally I became an SEO specialist.
Interesting. It's really cool to see someone come from that kind of consumer behavior perspective where you're really interested in understanding how people kind of complete their task or find the things that they're looking to find or get where they want to go in a way that's helpful for them, where, bookmarking is always great. Direct traffic is always great.
Yeah.
I know a lot of people that talk about how running ads for your brand is like the best thing that you can do because people already know you. And so making it as easy as possible to get to you as possible is a great start. And it's super interesting to see how you fit it in with just the whole consumer behavior aspect of it. That's awesome. So one thing that we always want to know from experts in the field are really what's going on. Like, what are the trends in general that you're noticing in SEO right now that you're excited about?
So one of the prominent, I'd say, trends in SEO is the move from strings to things, the move from keyword-based search to entity-based search, where Google uses these extensive databases that they call knowledge graphs to serve data that is, like geared towards meeting the user intent. And it's got so efficient at it that we are kind of, just learning still how these entities are being analyzed by Google and how these search results appear. So we have featured snippets. We have so many new features that Google is using. We have Google Discover, we have Google News, we have Google Shopping. Constantly new features are being introduced to the platform. And all these features, if not most of them, use entities. And this is, a new field of optimization. And a lot of SEOs still don't talk about entity optimization enough as they should. And I think this is one of the most interesting areas to explore.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely super interesting because it really reminds me from the kind of birthplace of SEO, back in the early 2000s. I remember I was going after keywords on a site that I built, and it was a lot more straightforward. Get links, yes. Write content that kind of made sense and had your keywords in there, and you're pretty good. But now it's so challenging to rank, right? It's not easy. And I mean, a lot of people talk about how, you can still follow a certain kind of pattern to get there, but it's definitely not as easy as it used to be. And when you talk about entity SEO, I think about the early days where things were a lot easier because there's more opportunities. And it seems like entity SEO, from what I'm getting from you, is that entity SEO opens up a little bit more, land grab to be able to rank for things that matter, that make sense for the users, but aren't essentially inundated by people that have been people have had a presence for 15 years and have an amazing domain rank where you can never outcompete them, right? So
that's right.
Maybe can you talk about like how do you take advantage of it? Maybe one or two of the parts that you think are most interesting to go after today, and how you're going after that. And for someone that may not know that much about entity SEO or whichever one you talk about.
Right. So a little story. The way I imagine entity SEO was developed is that Google engineers, probably during their lunch break, were discussing various terms and keywords, and they started talking about pineapples. And pineapple is a great keyword because it's very tricky. If you use the old Google model, the one that you spoke of, the one that was very straightforward, string-based model, just this is it, find it. Actually, that turned out to be a very complicated keyword because in itself, it contains pine and apple, none of which is pineapple. And that was a really interesting problem. So they realized we have to tag this keyword with something so we understand that it's neither pines nor apples, and our search results do not feature results that are irrelevant to the user. Yeah. And by doing so, meeting the search intent where it is. And so they created, they called it a thing initially, but then they expanded to organizations, to persons, to objects, books, movies, and they needed a term that encompasses all these things, and that was entity. And entity was the perfect fit because it was a term used in IT way back in the 80s still, to try to explain these complex constructs that have no real name but exist. Sure. So that's really how I envisioned that the entity SEO became a reality. And ever since, we see every single year Google improving the database they are using as a source to understand entities. And now, in fact, they are using artificial intelligence and what they call machine learning to really, plug in these machines into data to try to understand the relationship between words. So, if you're building a cocktail, you're going to use ice, you're going to use vodka, you're going to use a glass. All these are related to cocktails. Sure. And Google knows that because it looks at the relationship, how these words are being used in the same sentence across the whole internet. So we're talking about a very smart machine that can really understand literally everything that we humans can understand. And that is, the silver lining that divides two worlds, strings or keywords, things or entities. And there are instances where you Google for something and you use a particular keyword, and the page that ranks number one does not contain this keyword, not even in the title, nor in the body itself. So the reason why this happens is because Google uses entities. Like if you Google for a certain object, Google has a database already pre-existing with all the features, tags, descriptions of this thing, and they serve it to you as a user as a knowledge panel. So for example, if you type Apple, there's a conflict. Are we talking about the fruit? Are we talking about the company Apple? Or are we talking about Apple, the brand? So all these are different entities. It's the same keyword. So you see, when you are doing keyword optimization, you are only reaching a certain level of optimization, and there is more to uncover.
Sure. And then it sounds a little bit like some of the long tail keywords can kind of relate to entity SEO. What are your plans to take advantage of entity SEO? Do you have some examples of what you're doing on a day-to-day basis to take advantage of that?
Right. So most people I talk to, they struggle to understand how this process works, but it's really simple. One way of doing entity SEO is if you have access to SEMrush, there's a tab called organic research. It's one of the most frequented features on SEMrush, and it's a really cool asset. Basically, you go there and you just type whatever search term you want to research in your own space. You know, for example, let's take the space where I am, cybersecurity, right? So let's say identity management, and you type it in and it gives you results, all the results, how it looks from search engine results pages. You can see 1 to 20 listed, you know, all the pages, and next to these pages there are some basic metrics: authority score for that page, number of backlinks pointing to that page, and number of keywords this page is ranking for. So you look at the first 10 results and you will see patterns. One of the patterns you will see is that you will see an outlier page, a page that has an authority score that is very low, a page that does not have many backlinks, and a page that does not have many ranking keywords. The next question is, what the hell is this page doing here?
Yeah.
Right? And
yeah. And who's their SEO manager, right?
that's the next question. You should be hire that person. So yeah, that's, you know, that should be intriguing enough for SEO specialists to start researching what this page is and how this page was built, what kind of content was used, the internal linking structure on this page, how did they formulate the questions inside of this page. And you will see more often than not that they are hitting the entity in the head. Like they are really trying to get to answer all the questions about a single entity. And you have a page that talks about, for example, identity management as a topic. It talks about identity management. It goes over all the important questions. It provides content and internal links that are meaningful. This is far more important than, you know, shoving millions of backlinks into a page that does not address the entity correctly. When you study the entity, you will see that under the umbrella of identity management, there are various terms that in one way or another relate to this topic. And Google has, you know, made a cluster of all the keywords that belong to the topic of identity management. Your job as an SEO specialist is to find all these terms, make a list of all these terms, and then reverse engineer the production of that page by creating something that tackles all these terms, provides maybe more quality and more quantity in terms of the actual content. So that's a very practical example how to do entity SEO.
I mean, it sounds like you're kind of relating back to kind of your consumer behavior part of it, where you're really trying to understand the full, full impact or full interest of what the person was trying to figure out, and trying to provide not just an answer to their basic question or their first question, but give a real comprehensive view of this is all you need to know about this entire topic that's relevant to you. And here are the 18 questions with thorough answers, videos in there, relevant other articles to review, but a whole analysis to give you a real thick content piece on one subject matter versus, maybe 7 content pieces, each answering each individual question that might do well for, might do okay for that keyword in the question, but, misses the entity search where you're talking about. So instead of producing, things every day, maybe this is a one piece every 2 weeks that really has a thorough depth for the user. Interesting.
Right. I would also say that it is important if it's a huge topic with, a search volume over 5,000 monthly searches. it's natural then to keep branching out into subtopics and building pages for subtopics within that topic.
Sure.
As the search term is being expanded and Google improves, it starts developing new topics as well. So to stay ahead of the curve, try to think about what is the next subtopic that I should branch out into and explore and see, what the entities are here, what the, keywords that need to be in this page. Just, create Excel tables with all
That's
these
an
keywords.
entity in itself too.
Exactly, because it will become, even though it's not today an entity, but it will become 3 years from now, because we see Google is just using AI to
Mhm.
learn, and it's like an exponential growth of I want to say expertise, but of really serving the best possible results. That's the end goal.
I mean, it's pretty cool, pretty insightful. I definitely know a few people that'll be using some of that into
Yeah.
SEO perspective. Um, and can you tell me just a little bit about the tactic that you've used to stay ahead of just general trends and changes in SEO over the years? I mean, it seems like entity SEO is what you're working on now. But can you maybe go in about like if you've used anything else, or you could just talk about how you figured out more about entity SEO and how you found out a little bit more about how to use this tactic and maybe some tools that you're using. You talked about SEMrush, which is a great tool. But is there anything else that you're using to manage, the taking advantage of entity SEO?
Yeah, it's a big question. Let's unpack it into
Yeah.
multiple. So I guess first question is how do I stay up to date?
Yeah.
Uh, uh, there is no such thing as understanding how the algorithm works. We do to a certain degree, but nobody fully understand, because if you do, then you can build your own search engine. And that's very, very complicated. I'd argue impossible. Even, like even Google, if you destroy everything today and you tell them, let's build this again, I don't think they will be able to
It'll
do
be
it.
different. It'll be different.
It's going to be different. It's not going to be the same thing. And that's why you hear John Mueller often say it depends, because they don't, even internally, they can't answer a lot of questions. And that's just the nature of what they do. So to stay up to date, I tend to follow prominent figures that I know for a fact that they are authorities. So one example would be Dixon Johns. He's like the leading figure for entity SEO. He has written an incredible book that, like, I don't know how this book is even legal. That's how good this is. Like, it's called Moving from Strings to Things. And he shows the evolutionary path of Google algorithms, how they change in the way they process information and queries,
Yeah.
and how they use different databases to, like match the intent where the intent is. It's a very complicated world, but whatever you learn out of it, it will help you understand very complicated concepts. And once you understand these concepts, then building up is much easier. But if this is a complete, unknown to you, Dixon Jones is a good leading authority
And
to follow.
how'd you find out about it in the first place?
Yeah, by Googling, by using the tool that people pay me to understand.
That's cool. That's cool. I know a lot goes on in Twitter, and so it's always fun to figure out where people are learning about their tactics.
Yeah.
And then, what other tools are you using to help you with your SEO efforts these days that are impactful?
Yeah, so there are simple tools, and there are Google APIs, like
Yeah.
tools developed by Google that, require a certain degree of programming for you to use, but they are very helpful. I'll go with the simple ones first. So there is this tool called Text Optimizer. And I promote this tool so much that all my coworkers believe firmly that they are paying for these promotions. Maybe they should, they're not. This is a crazy tool. Like what it does basically is that you plug in a URL into it, and it tells you in 3 fields what the search engines think this article is about.
Okay.
Very simple, very intuitive, and it's just a revelation. Like I do this with content writers all the time that claim they know the SEO. I take the URLs that they've written, I plug it there, and it turns out the fields that come up are nothing related to what the target keyword is. And I
Wow.
asked them, is that, do you know why? And of course they don't. And from there, I introduce entity SEO, and I say it's because we need to look at this topic and understand what belongs inside this topic. It might be, as I said, you talk about identity management in cyberspace. If you talk about identity management, you got to talk about cyber threats as well. If you talk about identity management, you got to talk about, like prominent tools like password management.
Mm-hmm.
These are things you need to hit in your article to make sure that you're gearing the article towards the right entity, and it's being served for the query that you want it to be served for. And Text Optimizer is a great tool for this. It really is intuitive, easy to use, and you don't need to be tech savvy to use it.
Well, that's always helpful, as we know this space is filled with very technical tools sometimes. Um, and so once you're talking about getting people on board with understanding entity SEO and writing things in a different way and getting different kinds of content out there, how are you actually getting these things prioritized and implemented in your company or in your agency? Prioritization seems to be always a challenge with a lot of people I know in the industry, and so would love to understand how you're doing that.
Uh, it's a flexible process. It depends on, in my case, it depends on the business leaders, because within the corporation that I work, we have business units. Each business unit has a different philosophy, and you got to meet them where they are. You have to talk to everyone, and they have to, again, like I'm gonna, sound like a broken record, but it's a lot about trust. If they feel they can trust you, that you will provide results 6 months from today, it's going to be easy. You just have to follow, best practices. So the process itself depends, and it mostly is, creating a checklist. That's one of the first steps. Having a really good checklist that is tailored specifically for a, marketing objective and industry relevant job. So you don't grab just, random, stuff. You have to really do your research, understand what are, like, first the thing, or who is number one for that term, and then take that page and scrutinize it, analyze it, go into every single link, see where these links are going, look at the, page views, look at the estimations, use multiple SEO tools to understand what Google is already serving as number one. And then from there, create a plan, a strategy, how to get to that position. Use checklists to help the content writers stay on top of their content. And then create an SEO review session where you would revise what's done and use tools to show your content writers where they made a mistake and educate them in the process.
Okay.
Because this is, once the content writer knows what an entity is and why it is important, they will change the way they write. And that's where, the gold nuggets are, like by changing our behavior and starting adapting to how search engines work, every coming article will start getting more and more hits. And finally, you will reach topical authority across the whole website, covering multiple topics that are relevant to your business. And it takes time, obviously.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely sounds like a good strategy, because you're coming in with maybe a tactic that most people haven't really spent much time on, and introducing something new, and then talking to the content team and kind of using a tool to show them, well, this is what you're showing to Google. Is this really what you're trying to do? And when it isn't, it's a good opportunity for you to help, manage them towards the kind of content that you want them to be writing to be able to rank for entity SEO. So, I mean,
Exactly.
I love that perspective because, a lot of times I'm on the technical side of things, and it's the kind of thing of, hey, fix the fallback pages, because they're falling back to, something that isn't relevant at all, and it's a huge technical debt thing that's been years kicked. The can's been kicked down the road too many times, and no one wants to take it on because it's a gigantic project. And those are the things that I see every day, which is pretty cool, because you're seeing things that are a lot more focused on how you can kind of challenge the status quo and reorient the strategy where you're still using that person's expertise. Like the content writer, you're not changing exactly how they do anything. You're just kind of navigating them a little bit towards a different type of writing or a different type of article or different focus, which is really cool, because I feel like content writers just want that focus. They want to know what to do. And I feel like that's a good way to get things implemented.
Definitely.
So I think it's pretty helpful. Wow. And then, what about internally at a company versus, externally when you're dealing with clients? Can you talk a little bit about prioritizing things differently on those two different realms? Because I feel like they're pretty different. And since you sit across two different types of roles, sometimes it'd be helpful to understand your perspective on what do you do differently, what do you do the same, and how do you navigate that?
Right. So, although these are two different personas I'm dealing with at the company and as a founder of my own marketing agency, I should say, like, what are these personas before I say what kind of communications I have with them.
Sure.
So at Aleph Website, the company that I built with my friend, and we deal with small business owners, people who are, like, very ambitious, goal driven, have a passion of their own, but don't really have the time, and in many cases the resources to do marketing like a corporation would. So we take them from that, very a bad position for them in terms of digital marketing, and we elevate them. We scale them up enough so they can start thinking about online sales, so they can start thinking about, what keywords are bringing me traffic. And that conversation is different because there is a lot of bargaining involved. That's the first part of it. The second part of it, it's a lot about upselling. So obviously, you need a professional web designer. Okay. And then throughout the conversation, I make sure that the client knows that user experience is not just design. It's also the content. It's also the wording. It's the language you're using. It's the brand. And that introduces SEO. And oftentimes, because we do a great job onboarding the client starts trusting us. And from that point on, they trust we will do SEO well. We go after the low-hanging fruits, we show our expertise, and they then basically hand over SEO to us. And now we have SEO controlled in-house. That's then our job to do SEO for this company. And usually this relationship maintains its long term. So that's how I deal with clients at Aleph Website. At the corporation where I work, and I worked at startups where it's also different, but at the corporation where I'm working right now, the common denominator in these conversations is trust. That's one thing that, like, you have to have that established first. If the VP does not think that you are expert in SEO, that's a problem. And it's tricky because a lot of questions you have to answer with it depends. And I thought to myself when I started this career, I hate this answer. it cannot always be it depends. I need to know the answers. And I started learning like crazy. And I learned a lot about how search engines work. Enough to have more confidence than to say it depends. Because it depends is such a poor answer, like it does not show that you understand the subject enough for someone to consult you.
Sure.
But if you know something, if you can show an example of how something works, and people can then um, let you deal with whatever it depends should be, and provide them only the information they want to hear. Does it work? Does it not work? If it works, how much it costs? Just the basic, just this, very
Yeah.
basic responses, like an example, like right now we're introducing backlinking, you know, uh, you have to choose a vendor. You have to go through the vetting process. There is so much involvement. It takes 7 months, to get someone on board, and then that not talking results. Still, you need
Yeah.
6 months more to build results. It takes a year for the VP to see, that's what you're an expert at. That's a long time. So trust is very important. You have to have the answer. You have to be very precise, very concise. Don't waste the time of a VP. They are very busy people. Just give them what they want to hear and stand by it. Like do whatever it takes to execute. Like it's really important to maintain trust. That's like number one always.
And what are some of these low hanging fruit that you go after, whether it's a client or at the companies that you work for? What are typically the first few low hanging fruit that you go after to prove and establish some of that trust that you talk so much about?
Right. So, like if you are doing, for example, backlink collaborations, right?
Sure.
You want to get backlinks to certain, let's say, product pages. So there are some product pages that are ranking number 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 10. And there are some product pages buried, position 30, position 40. Forget about these. These are not low-hanging fruits, right? You're not going to get them ranking, even if you boost them with backlinks. It's not going to happen. Maybe, but don't count on it. Instead, focus on these pages that are position 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 for many of the keywords that are important for you. If you give them the necessary nudge up to position 1, which won't require a big effort, you will see a sudden rush of traffic.
Yep.
And traffic trickles down to conversions, and conversions are registered in whatever marketing automation tool you're using, but they can see it. And if they see it, they say, oh, I see what you did and it's working. Do more of that.
So you find the few pages that are already pretty good ranking, but not the top of the page. And you figure out which one or two or three or four of those that you could try to work one way or another, whether it's backlinks or other stuff to try to get them to rise. And then, so you'll see some more immediate impact, because we all know number one is not incrementally better than number 5. It's just way more traffic. And so that's a good insight. Okay. So, I'd love to kind of switch gears and talk a little bit about, just kind of industry in general. And, there's people are always trying to do different things in the industry and find a different way to do stuff. It sounds like you've discovered this entity SEO, and that seems like a great thing to do. But apart from that, what should everyone in our space stop doing today? Like, what's everybody just like, you just disagree with how people are doing one thing?
So there is one thing I am very opinionated about, and it's how people use LinkedIn to promote guest posts.
Yeah.
Just stop doing it. I receive like 10 at least invitations every day for people selling guest posts, and sometimes they don't even bother looking at who it is they're sending it to. And like I remember this one invitation was like, "Dear madam, please buy my guest post. You win a lot. Thank you."
Not
I
very
was
personalized.
Yeah, I was like, buddy, you're just reported. And I do this for everyone who does the same thing. Do not sell guest posts like an under-counter medicine, like don't, it's not how an SEO should behave. And again, like for me, trust is a big factor. This is no way to start a conversation with someone that you want to build a relationship with. That's something we need to stop doing.
Yeah. I think that's pinging on a need where, getting, increasing rank is harder and harder sometimes. And so getting backlinks is a go-to method for a lot of people, but they're hard to get, they're not, people just don't give them out. And by emailing them and saying, hey, you got a broken link here, here's my better content, they're not necessarily going to link to you. And like 8 times out of 10, they won't. Right.
Yeah.
And so it's, even if you play a real like helpful collaborator role, you sometimes don't get that far in that even, it takes a lot of work to get there. Okay. So apart from stopping to use LinkedIn to spam you with guest posting on their terrible domain ranking pages that are like just spammy as spammy can be, what should everyone in our space start doing today?
So one recommendation that I even like I have some people that I'm mentoring and I tell them the same thing. Do your best to use as many tools. It's not enough to use SEMrush because it's a comprehensive project-based model for an SEO tool. It's not enough. I've seen SEMrush miss in estimations, like making scary mistakes. For that reason, I use Moz as well, but I use a bunch of other tools as well. And if a new tool appears, I try to use it as well just to see what's the difference. Rank Tracker is also a really good tool. There are many tools out there. There is Keyword Surfer. All of them give different estimations. But the task of an SEO specialist, and this is what every SEO specialist should be doing, is to look at all these tools and try to find the aggregate value. Try to find, like what things are, the same across all these tools, what things differ. 9 out of 10, it's the volume that is different. It's the trend that is different. Look at these trends, try to understand it, Google it yourself, and use multiple tools to get the best snapshot of how this keyword is performing today. Without that, you might start out, and develop a project and, push 10 people to optimize, to write content, and finally finish all of it and discover halfway through that you used the wrong metrics, or that the number that you had was a really bad estimate. And these are fatal errors, especially if you're like me, working at a corporation where every hour costs a lot of money. And when you waste people's time and assets and resources, that is on you as an SEO specialist.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a big point. A lot of our clients that we see at SEO Radar are using a real big SEO stack. In the tech industry, they talk about tech stacks, and I think the SEO stack just has as much importance. And people are doing it. People layer tool on tool on tool. Sometimes 2 competitors, they'll have both competitors because they want to have a different perspective on the same kind of thing like you're talking about. But even having other tools to kind of fill in the space, like you talked about Text Optimizer, which is super different from SEMrush or Moz or Ahrefs. But there's a lot of tools in the industry, so I feel like it becomes challenging to know what tools are good at what, and what's the all-in-one versus what are kind of individualized. And I feel like there's good all-in-ones and there's good individualized, and it's challenging as a person in the SEO industry to always know about everything because there's so many tools, and so many tools are trying to do a lot of things where maybe they're better at 2 or 3 things, like you talked about, where SEMrush has that one part to really figure out about keywords and the entity behind it all. Now, I want to give you some time to put the spotlight on you. Are there any projects you're working on, or anything you'd like people to know, or anywhere you'd like people to get in touch with you?
So obviously you can reach out to me on LinkedIn, just don't sell me guest posts. That's my condition. And you can read a lot about our work at Aleph website, the website, but also the blog. Just Google Aleph website blog. We have tons of content about user experience and how that ties to SEO. We have, everything from schema markup tricks to Google My Business best practices. Like we got content that discusses technical SEO, core web vitals, and it all comes from case studies. So it's really valuable. We're not getting a lot of clicks there, unfortunately, but it's because we're not spending so much time promoting our content. And I feel personally that I should be promoting this content. But again, I feel like anybody who visits these blog posts and reads will want to come back again. And I'm one of the SEO specialists that always is talking about user experience first and then SEO. So this is a typical situation where I am very confident that people who will visit Aleph website blog will find value, bookmark a page, and never again rely on search engines, but rely on your own, Chrome bookmark section instead.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean that's a wonderful insight and some good things here. Ali, I want to thank you so much for taking the time today. Everybody, this is Ali Syed and at Aleph website, and I encourage you guys to go there, visit the site. We'll have the links on our page as well, so you can get a link there to be able to navigate straight to find out more about Ali. And thanks so much.